Here's a little bit of nostalgia for you. These are the Sony WF-1000XM3s. They were my daily drivers for several years, as they were for many of you, but now we've got the brand new Sony WF-1000XM6s, which have undergone some pretty drastic changes. But how far have we really come since August 2019? And I want to start off by talking about the ANC, the active noise cancelling, because that is where some of the biggest leaps have happened. For lower frequencies, like engine drones, for example, the XM3s were rated for minus 20 decibels of noise reduction. The XM6s are rated for exceptionally more, and just as a baseline for comparison, these are actually 25% more efficient than the XM5s. At the mid-end, so voices and people talking, the XM3s could handle around 12 decibels, and the XM6s can go for a massive 26 decibels, effectively making voices completely vanish. Wind noise, though, was virtually a no-go on the XM3s, and I remember this pretty well actually. It used to be a pretty big problem, and surprisingly, there's not actually been any drastic changes to that with the XM6s, except from the form factor and fit. The only way that I can describe it is that wind noise now feels like it's just going around your ear rather than directly into it like we had with the XM3s. Now, the form factors contributed some more changes to how the active noise cancelling works, but if you remember, the XM3s had the QN1E processor, which was also definitely a limiting factor of the ANC at the time. The new XM6s use a dual processor system. It combines the integrated processor V2 with a new HD noise cancelling processor, the QN3E, which means the XM6 processes sound exceptionally faster than the older chips. Again, as a baseline, the XM6s are around 3 times faster in processing than the XM5s. In the real world, it means the XM6s are much better at cancelling out sudden sharp noises like a car horn, for example, whilst the XM3s were much better suited for tackling more consistent sounds like a car engine, for example. The other contributing factor to the all-round better noise cancelling of the XM6s lies not just in the techie stuff, but also in the passive noise cancelling. You'll remember on the XM3s, we actually got these pretty bog standard rubber ear tips, which were okay, but nothing special. Now, on the XM6s, we've got foam ear tips, and this is really important because they actually do many things. For starters, they actually conform to the shape of your ear canal a little bit better than rubber tips would, and they stay that way, so that stops sound from getting in and also sound from getting out. It also means that they're a little bit more comfortable and they stay in your ears much better. And speaking about staying in your ears, we should probably just reminisce about the design of the XM3s a little bit more here, because they were notorious for falling out your ears. They had this weird sort of imbalance to them, and honestly, I don't think any earbuds that I've ever tried have fallen out my ears as much as the XM3s. And despite all this, I've got to say that I actually didn't hate the design of the XM3s. We had this standout touch-sensitive disc, which I actually quite like because it means you know where you've got to press on the side of the earphone. We also had this black and bronze color theme, which I have to admit gave it a bit of a masculine, more mature, kind of sophisticated feeling that arguably we're kind of missing on the XM6s. But I'm not particularly upset about that because the XM6s have arguably been designed to be a lot more versatile than the XM3s. They've very much been designed to fit into your ear as snugly as possible. The XM3s very much felt like they were designed for office use and commuting. The XM6s feel like they've been designed for a bit of everything, and I can confidently take these out for a run, something that I'm not sure I could have done with the XM3s. Which actually brings me onto a really good point about the XM3s. You might remember at release, they didn't come out with a water rating, so there was no IP rating on the XM3s. With the XM6s, however, they're IPX4 rated, meaning you can go for a run, get a little bit sweaty, and if you get caught in the rain, it's not the end of the world. To be fair to the XM3s though, I did do all of those things anyway and never really had any issues, but it's definitely nice to have the reassurance of a proper IP rating. Anyway, I haven't actually touched on arguably the most important topic, which is audio quality. Now, going back to the XM3s, I remember that they had this very warm, fluffy, consumer boosted sound, which was fine for a lot of people. A lot of people have become accustomed to that, but for me, it just felt like more of the same. Now, if we switch over to the XM6s, Sony have done a great job of producing a much more neutral sound that I think is much better suited for all genres of music. It's crisp, it's sharp, it's not too heavy on the bass. It feels more mature. To be fair to the XM3s though, if you did want to tweak the equalizer settings, of course both the XM3s and the XM6s had their own companion apps. Nothing too crazy has changed, to be honest. You get a lot of the same options, but there's also a lot of new advanced features on the XM6s, some of which are utterly useless in my opinion, like the voice cue that tells you what time it is every hour with a silly little chime. I mean, why do we need that? But there are actually a lot of useful, interesting features to try as well, like the spatial audio, which tracks your head movement to keep the sound anchored to whatever screen you're looking at. For a lot of power users, this is going to be an awesome feature, but for me personally, I like to leave this feature off. Now, we can't talk about massive leaps in audio quality without talking about codecs first. So for the audiophiles out there, this section's for you. Back in 2019, the XM3s actually did not support LDAC, which is wild considering it's Sony's very own high-res audio codec. They were strictly using standard AAC and SBC and relying heavily on their DCE-HX upscaling tech to try and make their compressed MP3s and Spotify streams sound that little bit better. It was fine for the time, but it definitely had a ceiling. If we switch to the XM6s, however, they're an absolute flex in this department. They fully support LDAC, delivering high-resolution 24-bit audio right to your ears at roughly 3 times the data rate of the older buds. On top of this, they've upgraded to the newer AI-powered DCEE Extreme to rebuild the loss detail in your compressed music in real time, alongside supporting the ultra-efficient Bluetooth LE audio. This basically means if you're streaming from high-fidelity platforms like Tidal, for example, you're going to see a massive difference between the XM3s and the XM6s. Nerdy stuff aside, there's also another important aspect of the audio quality of both these earphones that we really need to discuss, and that's actually the call quality. There's been an extreme shift in quality since the XM3s with the new XM6s. The XM6s come with 8 microphones now, which not only helps the active noise cancelling, but it's also going to help your call quality as well. And what Sony have done this year on the XM6s is actually incorporated bone conduction technology, which is pretty fancy, but also makes complete sense on truly wireless earbuds. And it's not just a fancy tech gimmick, because I remember all too well on the XM3s, the call quality was absolutely atrocious, not only because of the poor latency and connection issues, but also the microphones. I mean, if you were just walking alongside a road, whoever's on the other end of the phone just physically could not hear you. The XM6s, however, are a massive leap forward. Sony has not only thrown in these bone conduction sensors, but they've also thrown in this AI-based noise reduction algorithm. And it's seriously no joke. Just listen to this clip that I took right next to a busy road for my full XM6 review.
Okay, so I'm both blessed and cursed to live right next to a rather busy road. So you guys let me know in the comment section what you think of the Sony WF-1000XM6s when you're outside in a more noisy environment.
It really is incredible just how far this technology has come on the XM6s. Another major throwback here, aside from the latency issues that we used to get on the XM3s with random disconnects, do you remember the absolute headache that we used to have if you wanted to switch devices? You had to manually disconnect and reconnect all the time. It was an absolute pain. Thankfully, the XM6s come with the latest Bluetooth standards, incredibly seamless multi-point connection, and they support LE audio. Switching from a YouTube video on your laptop to an incoming call on your phone is basically instant now. It's one of those quality of life tech upgrades that you probably don't appreciate until you go back and look at some of the older tech. Now, throughout this review, I've been holding up the cases, and I feel like we should actually talk about this because there's some distinct differences between the two cases, and in some areas I'd actually argue we've actually gone backwards. So the XM3s had a well, pretty massive case, to be honest. It wasn't exactly pocket friendly. It might have looked a little bit awkward in your jean pocket, but it wasn't too bad in that sense, and actually it looked pretty stylish. I didn't actually mind the design at all. It also, and don't hate me for saying this, feels a lot more premium than the XM6 case. Now, the XM6 case has reduced in size significantly in comparison to the XM3s, but we've also lost out on NFC. Not really an important thing because we've also gained QI charging, but still, it's a feature lost. Now, I do prefer the smaller, more compact design of the XM6s over the XM3s. Is much more pocket friendly, as I say, but I've got to admit, it's the one thing about the XM6s that I've not been overly impressed about. There's something that feels a little bit cheap about them that I don't really get with the XM3s. That being said though, although we've gone backwards in some areas, there have been some improvements on the XM6s, mainly with battery life. With the XM3s, you're going to get around 6 hours with ANC turned on, which was pretty decent for back then. But the XM6s pushes that number up to 8 hours of listening time, and when you take into account the case charging as well, it brings a total amount of hours up to 24. Even more importantly, on the XM6s though, a quick 2 to 3 minute charge is actually going to get you around an hour of playback time, which is pretty essential in my eyes. So the verdict, which should you buy in 2026? Well, absolutely don't buy the XM3s. I mean, they were great at the time, but the XM6s really do outshine it. But this video is not about which one should you buy, it's about reflecting and looking at how far we've come in terms of technology. And I do think Sony have offered a lot with the XM6s. There's some things that aren't quite perfect in my opinion, and we definitely need to wait and see if the XM6s have the same battery degradation issues which ultimately killed my XM3s. It's also worth considering the launch prices as well. Around 7 years ago now, the XM3s were priced at around $230. The XM6s are coming in closer to that $300 mark, which is a steeper price tag, but I've got to admit, when you get all financy and take into account inflation and the extra technology and features that we have on the XM6s, I mean, I personally can warrant paying that extra money. I'd also point out in that $100 or so difference that we get so much more versatility with the XM6s. Now you can confidently take them out in the rain and go to the gym with them. They really are a great all-rounder now. Audio-wise, I'm really happy to say we've moved away from that warm, slightly muddy consumer sound to a crisp, more mature and precise audio, which I absolutely love on the XM6s. If you are thinking about giving Sony a try again or upgrading from the XM3s or the XM4s to the XM6s, I mean, I think the technology has matured beautifully. Sony really have ironed out a lot of those rough edges. The only question mark for me is the battery degradation. Are we going to see the same issues 12 months from now? And we can't really tell that without more testing. In the meantime, click in the left or right corner now to get to my full review of the XM6s. See you in the next one.